Hey guys, this is Dr. Rumsey, and as a reminder, I'm redoing some videos for the proposals and because I lost them. And so this one's kind of an abbreviated version of what I normally would do, but the content is still good, so pay attention. The following lecture is proposal lecture number 2, and it's about the content of what goes inside of your proposal. Now, keep in mind that every single one of you has a different project that you're going to be proposing. One of the unique features of this class is that it is a project-based class. So that means that you need to listen to what I say about what goes in them and then pick for yourself which parts seem most relevant to the project that you yourself are proposing. Some sections may not work, and I'll mention those along the way. Okay, this is just a quick reminder on in the last video, I posted this graphic from the Johnson-Sheehan text that you read for week 2, and it just shows the relative percentage the size of each of the big sections. So the thing to remember here is that introduction is probably your shortest section and that your longest section is the project plan, but that your current situation is still substantive, and so make sure that you do a good job on that one. All right, in your introduction, there's a couple things to keep in mind right off the bat. First is that you need to have an overview statement. This is a brief roadmap of the document. It is meant to be 3 to 5 sentences and not like an English essay, which is the inverted triangle that leads to a thesis, right? That's just too much. Instead, what I'm looking for is 3 brief sentences that say, here is what I'm writing about, here is why you should care, here's where I'm going from here, okay? You're going to say things like, the following document proposes that, fill in the blank. Okay, you're not going to be saying, in America today, whatever, okay? So it's different. Tech writing is crisp, clear, and coherent. Okay, next. Sometimes introductions include more than just those 3 to 5 sentences. Okay, sometimes a requirement from senior design, for example, might be that you have a purpose statement or a scope statement. Those are basically like a little bit more elaborate descriptions of what's going on, what your overall goal for the project is, the overall purpose, obviously, since that's the name of it. You get the idea. Sometimes it's combined then with other sections within the introduction, and you don't have to have a separate subsection. Options, keep them in mind. Okay, so then background information is something that a lot of you probably are going to include. Because this is the section that gives your reader a sense of how you came to this project. What are some pieces of information that give context to why you are doing this project now? So you could say, for example, this is my senior design project, and I'm working with so-and-so and such company to do blah, 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 okay? If you're doing secondary research, you might say, this would be the section where you would say, I'm researching new technologies to understand gardening something, and in order to fashion my own gardening something for future reference. Like, give me some kind of sense of where you came to the project. Okay, objectives or outcomes is a section that all of you need to have. Okay, the thing to keep in mind, though, is that these objectives and outcomes are different than specifications. Okay, we'll talk about specifications when we get to project plan. Outcomes or objectives are what you have for the project overall. They need to be concrete verbs, so walk, design, build, research, you get the idea, okay? They need to be measurable, observable, attainable, and specific. So you can't just say, you could say read some texts, but that's not really specific enough. So you might say, I'm going to read 3 trade journals and annotate 4 academic articles, right? So they're verb-based and they're actually specific. Did I forget anything? This is the one section that needs to be in a bulleted list. You can include a full sentence before it to introduce the list, but it actually needs to be a list. Okay, current situation is the second section that needs to be in all of your proposals. There could be several components. The idea here is that you're defining what the problem is, you're defining what the need is, or you're saying, here is what things are right now, here is why what we have right now isn't working, okay? The goal, remember, is to persuade your reader first that there is a problem. Sometimes this section is called the statement of need or the problem statement. Each of those things kind of means the same thing, but because there are some different nuances to those subsections, I call it current situation overall, which covers all the different kinds that it could be. So your current situation needs to specifically define what the problem is. Answer the question, what exactly is the problem you are trying to solve? If you can't easily answer that question, okay, then you may have not really decided on what your topic is yet, and you need to go back to the drawing board and do some more brainstorming. If you can't easily say, I would like to do this because of this, there's something missing and you've got some more work to do. All of this should be written in a paragraph form, 1 to 2 to 3 paragraphs. The idea is to give an overview or big picture of what the problem or current situation is. So you need to also show cause and effect in terms of defining what the problem is. So you could answer questions like, when did it begin? How big is the problem? Who's affected? Or how is production limited? Those sorts of things. Are there aspects of the project that you're not going to address? So this is the spot where you also address what the scope of your project is, at least nominally. You need to make sure you offer evidence to support your claim. Okay, you can't just say, well, I'll get to that. You need to also maybe show a diagram or illustration that helps illustrate and show and not just tell that there is some kind of a need or a problem. You need to make sure that you demonstrate in some way how, like, a product is unsatisfactory or a specific communication pattern between computers is ineffective, those sorts of things. Keep your wording simple and avoid jargon. Now, remember that when you are talking in proposals, and the purpose of my class is to make sure that you can write technical information to a broader audience. This does not mean that you are dumbing it down. Instead, you are trying to explain your technical project to someone with a PhD in English or to someone who's in a different field of engineering. They may have just as much knowledge and information as you do, and frankly be equivalent to you where in any given company, but you've got to be able to explain it. An electrical engineer has to be able to explain it to a mechanical. You've all got to be able to talk to marketing about whatever product you make. Okay, so that's kind of what this class is about. Oh, I just did a thing. I'm sorry. Here, hang on. Okay, so don't confuse the lack of something to be a problem. Okay, that's circular reasoning, actually. So just because you find some new widget that you think is pretty cool doesn't mean that your company actually needs that widget, right? And you'll find that if that's the case, you're going to have a really hard time sort of defending why it is that you need that product, right? Instead, if there's actually a need for a new product, you're going to have plenty to say about how your current situation is a problem and that this new product would actually resolve that, right? So make sure that you aren't doing the circular reasoning and that you actually have an exigency or a problem that you're trying to solve. Things to avoid. Don't assume that your reader is going to agree with you, okay? You are persuading, and so if you even think about it that your reader is maybe a little bit hostile, doesn't want to approve it, what do you need to say to make sure that he or she is actually reading it and says, hey, this is a really good idea, or, oh wow, there really is a problem. It's your job to show the problem or situation with supporting evidence. Don't just say it. Don't just say, well, obviously it's a problem, because it's not obvious to everyone. The section is several paragraphs plus any relevant images. Okay, so the project plan is the longest section, as I mentioned earlier. It's going to contain the bulk of what you have to say. So you're talking about your overall solution. You're talking about major and minor steps to get from point A to point B, and you're talking about the deliverable itself, meaning the thing, the service, the product, the research project, whatever it is that you're going to complete during the semester, that's the deliverable. You might start off with an introductory paragraph about your overall solution, give it a paragraph description of this is what the gist of what it is that I'm going to be proposing, right? state it in simple terms, and then after the simple terms, you can go into a lot more specificity, and anyone who's outside of your field is going to be able to refer back to that initial paragraph to say, okay, wait, what's going on? And oh, that's right. There's sort of an overview that you provide at the beginning. So how are you going to get the work done? Okay, you need to make sure that you list all the major and minor steps. Sometimes minor steps don't need to be included in a proposal. If you're going for something to be brief and concise, then maybe minor steps aren't necessary. But essentially, you need to let your reader know how you're going to get the job done. Okay, it's a systematic plan that discusses your method, procedures, timetable, benchmarks, those sorts of things. Subheadings might be helpful to distinguish between various steps, methods, or illustrations, depending on what you include. And again, here's that moment when you need to really think about, what do I include, what don't I include, in order to persuade my audience. Again, how you're going to get the work done. One thing that most of you are going, no, in fact, all of you need to include is some sort of representation of tasks relevant to time. Okay, so that just means how many tasks you have and how long each of those tasks is going to take to complete, or what the deadlines are. Okay, so a lot of you are going to have really elaborate Gantt charts, for example, that you've created in separate software. Don't try and copy those and paste them into the proposal, because they never fit and they're awkward and they're so tiny to read that I can't read it, and I'm fairly young. So if you're going to do an actual Gantt chart, it's probably best to include that as a separate document and simply reference it within the proposal as being part of an appendix. Okay. There are other ways you can simplify it. You can give a very rudimentary Gantt chart that you make in just using a table. There's lots of ways to do it other than Gantt chart. Okay, so you need to describe the deliverable. The deliverable is going to be what you produce. Okay, for primary research, this is likely going to be a thing, a widget, a process, service, a way for two computers to talk to one another. You get the idea. Okay, there's thinginess to it. If you're doing secondary research, the thing you are producing is just the white paper, but it's going to be a much bigger white paper or a different kind of white paper, because you're taking what other people have said, right, secondary research, on a technical topic and making a very elaborate research paper that you submit in lieu of creating a thing. Target specifications are something that, especially those of you in primary research, are probably going to want to include. Remember, this is not as specific as what the final specs will be. The final specs assume you've already built the prototype, right? And so you can say exactly what nuts and bolts and software and what have you use to create the thing. When you're doing target specifications, you're saying, here's where I'm aiming. This is what I think is a best guess or best case scenario of what I think I'm going to use to make the thing, right? So if you do a really good job on your target specs, there's a good chance you won't have to rewrite them when you get to the end, but it's okay if they're a little more vague than you normally would make them. I think I already said all of this. Oh, things to keep in mind are that target specs are talking about the physical characteristics of the thing or deliverable that you are creating. Okay? Materials to be used, pieces per hour, man hours, illustrations, sketches, flow charts, sometimes circuit diagrams or CAD drawings, at least really rough ones. I've had students rough sketch something on a napkin and take a picture of it and add it. So, I mean, it's really just intended to give your reader a sense of, this is what I think it's going to look like, and then they're able to approve or disapprove, and you can go from there. Okay, so qualifications. This is the part where if you are working in a partnership in senior design, then you need to say so specifically, and both partners need to tell me this. Okay. Also, this is where you might give a brief biography or something that states that you're capable of doing this work. Now, for those of you doing secondary research, it's probably not necessary that you include this, because you're a student and students do primary or secondary research all the time. Okay, I mean, that's what every research paper that you've had since the dawn of time, that's secondary research. So you probably don't need this section. Conclusion, you might talk about cost and benefits, especially if you have a commercial partner. You need to make sure that you include this. Don't just restate the main points like an English essay. Talk about what your next steps are should you receive approval. And then view your course calendar. Make sure you watch lecture number 3. And that'll be uploaded here in just a bit. And I think that is it. So have a great day, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions. You can contact me